for another Tuesday night live stream. Oh man, I got a lot to talk about tonight. But first, I definitely want to talk about the happenings this weekend. We had we had two hell of an auctions. So if you guys have not heard or offered any support, definitely go to the GoFundMe for Midwest Comic Man Paul's daughter. We'll go ahead and copy and paste that link now in case you guys haven't heard. But Paul's daughter, she is fighting the good fight still. They have actually raised $3,500 for the GoFundMe, and we raised a pretty good amount for them this weekend. So big thanks to the Comic Corps for having me on and all that good stuff as usual. And thanks to everybody who turned out to sell some books, donate books, and all that good stuff. Because I think we raised over $3,000 on our two auctions combined. So big thanks to everybody who turned out for that. So check out the GoFundMe, chip in a couple bucks if you have not done so already. And then I don't think we've actually had a chance to talk about since Baltimore. I believe we raised over $1,000 for the Hero Initiative at our booth. So big thanks to everybody who turned up at Baltimore and threw in a couple dollars into that Heroes Initiative jar. I know we had a lot of fun interviewing people for the Hero Initiative. But definitely a huge thank you to everybody who, coughed up a buck or $20 or what have you. And I was very happy to hear that we raised a couple dollars for the Hero Initiative while we were there. So you guys know how this goes. We'll start by talking about reads last week. I want to talk about two contests that are going on in the community. I'm going to start with J Hood Creatives contest shortly. Top 5 single individual comic books of all time ever this week today, I guess. You guys know how that goes. And then Sam's Tangled Web set a 500 subscriber contest where he wants to know my favorite villain. But first, we got to get into this chat to see what's going on here. Oh, man, look at this. I'm afraid I've got some bad news. We got Chris Barrett in the chat. How's it going, Chris? He's always around. I love it. Probably I think he said he's the snapper car of the Comic Corps. So always enjoy seeing Mr. Barrett in the chat. Also have JB from Discovery Bay Comics. He had a heck of a show right before this. What's on the day with Discovery Bay? You guys know all about that. The hardest working guy in the community. I guess I'm supposed to be calling him Disco now or something. So I keep seeing people call him that. So love that nickname. So what's going on, Disco? Next up, we got JLS Comics. How's it going, man? Y'all been loving Jesse's G.I. Joe videos. You might actually see one G.I. Joe book pop up tonight on one of these lists, so stay tuned for that. We got Liking the Covers 4963. How's it going, man? Another guy who's always watching the live streams, and I definitely appreciate that. All right, without further ado, I only got about 4 books last week. Really light reading week for me. I didn't get a chance to read much anyway, so I was kind of lucky I didn't have a big pull list. So we'll just start at the top of the stack here. I read Angel. What is this, number 6? They're doing the full-on Hellmouth crossover. This issue is all right. Like I was saying on the Comic Corps Friday show, this when you have a book called The Angel, you figured the character Angel would turn up in it somehow, but his storyline, I guess, was going on in the Hellmouth one-shot. And this storyline follows Fred and Gunn, who you might remember from the TV show. And they have been charged by a demon Lilith to find Spike, who has basically been sacrificed by Drusilla to open up the Sunnydale Hellmouth. So Spike is not in the mood to do anything, obviously. So when Gunn and Fred go looking for Spike, of course, typical Angel, Buffy, Whedonverse hijinks ensue. And that's where this issue leaves us off at. So not too bad, but like I said, inevitably, was it mandatory read for this crossover? Probably not. I guess they could have had like a 1-page thing of just them meeting if they wanted to get Gunn, Fred, and Spike together. So, like I said, fun read, not necessary. All right, next up, I don't know if I'm going to keep this one up. I got Spider-Man number 2 from the Abrams family. The first issue is pretty cool. It introduced kind of a neat Elseworld style alternate timeline concept for Spider-Man, where you follow his son in this read. And inevitably, this read is just kind of about his son not really wanting to carry the mantle of Spider-Man. He's obviously not too thrilled to find out, his father being Spider-Man got his mother killed. So obviously he doesn't like that. For some reason, he decides to put on a Spider-Man outfit after burning one. Aunt May digs out another so he can wear it to a costume party. And, of course, his Spider-Man senses come out when he's on a date. You guys know how that goes. So, like I said, not the worst, but I just wasn't that into it, I guess. So maybe when it's all collected into 5 issues and some sort of hardcover trade, it'll be a good, solid read. I was talking about this one next. We have the Swamp Thing, giant size, the one that hit local shops instead of Walmarts. This one was a little bit weird, but nonetheless, it was still all right. You had the Sunderland Corporation are out to find Swamp Thing, so basic premise in the world of Swamp Thing. And then you have like this type of voodoo priestess who's just hanging out with them. But I guess, voodoo priestesses got to eat too. So she betrays Swamp Thing to try to basically turn him into the Sunderland Corp. But for some reason, she really needs to eat the heart of Swamp Thing because remember, voodoo. Voodoo people like to eat hearts, I guess. I don't want to taunt voodoo people, please. But anyway, she eats the heart. And somehow, meanwhile, the Sunderland Court people are talking about how poisonous the heart of Swamp Thing is. So, of course, she basically dies then and there. And then cut to her funeral. And, she gets buried. But somehow the little turnip heart doesn't kill her. It just puts her in. It's kind of like that scene in Lost where those 2 awful characters that no one liked. It was like Somebody and Paolo or whatever. If you guys watch Lost, you may know what I'm talking about. There are these 2 random characters thrown in. And they just killed him off in the worst way possible. And that's what happens to this character here. She's the heart, gets buried, wakes up in her grave. And, it doesn't turn out well because that's where the story ends. She's buried alive. So, good Halloween tale, I guess. And you get reprints of Zatanna #1, Hellblazer #1. I think there's you get some Phantom Stranger action in there, too. So, some cool reprints are thrown in there as well. And then my pick of the week last week, Batman Curse of the White Knight #4. I kind of had my doubts about Curse of the White Knight at first. With the first couple issues, I was kind of like, should I just wait for the hardcover at this point? Issue 3 got really good, where it was Azrael versus Jim Gordon and Gotham City Police. That was a phenomenal ending. And then this one, like, there's just no stopping Azrael at this point. So basically, at the end of the last issue, not only did Jim Gordon kick the bucket, it was revealed that Batgirl is Babs. So her identity went public because Bruce Wayne wouldn't reveal his identity. So the Joker's in play here. Azrael's in play. So once Azrael kills Jim Gordon, Batgirl and, Harvey Bullock go after Azrael. And, that's not getting well because Batgirl, as you can see here, she's loaded up with guns. She just doesn't care at this point because her father's dead. So Batman, he tries to go out and save Batgirl's soul, basically. You know how Batman and guns go. So she actually has a shot on Azrael. Batman makes sure she misses. And then Azrael basically breaks Batgirl's back, full-on Bane. So, yeah, not good. So Batman, not only did he kind of mess up, he got Batgirl hurt now on top of everything. So that's where this issue leaves off. So it's getting pretty bad for Batman in this one. So easily my pick of the week, though. They're doing some good storytelling. The Sean Gordon Murphy art, not only the story, but the art is still phenomenal. He draws vehicles like no other. So this has definitely been probably my favorite read going on currently over the month. All right. So before we get into our first contest here, let's get back into this chat. Let's see who we got jumping in here. I think I saw we got Bear Island Comics. How's it going, man? Got to hang out with him in Baltimore a couple weeks back. He was a blast to hang out with. So big thanks for Bear for coming out. Glad he won that contest, and we got to hang out with him for a little bit. JLS is talking about Kurt Angle's brother, Eric Angle, I'm assuming. So there you go. We got Prowler671. Long time no see, man. How you doing, Prowler? And then they're still calling Andy McNugget in the chat, I guess. Poor old Andy and his beard. Gone too soon for sure, but it went to a good cause. So, he went from McGriddle with beard to McNugget without beard. Chad Logic. So thanks for that, Chad. Love the nicknames you come up with for people. So there you go. Comic Man Andy, one of the best. All right. So if you guys look in the links below, I put a link to J Hood Creative and his channel. So basically, J Hood Creative is celebrating 100 subs. Definitely well deserved there. and he decided to host a contest. It's actually at the end of the video. I posted in the link below. Basically, all he wants to know is what your top 5 favorite comics are of all time tonight, whatever. You guys know me. I could have presented a list of 5 tonight, and then tomorrow wake up and be like, oh, crap, I forgot about these 5 comics, and make a whole new list. So basically, he says subscribe, make a video. He wants to know 5 favorite single issues, and the winner will get a J Hood curation, which includes basically whatever sketch he feels like doing. He's going to watch your content and figure out your favorite characters and so on and so forth, and basically make a sketch or commission style work based on what you like. He's got to throw in some signed books and some other books based on what you like. So it sounds like a really awesome contest prize package. But nonetheless, definitely sub up his channel. He just started a couple months back, and he's got some phenomenal content. He's actually going live at 9:30 p.m. Eastern tonight. He's doing a premiere video, actually. And he tagged me it on Instagram, so I'm definitely going to have to show up to that now. So really like his channel, the work he's putting out. And he's actually gracious enough to offer up a commission opportunity on the Comic Core auction we had last Saturday. And big congratulations to Kavi, Comic Books NYC, for winning that. I'm sure he's going to do some great work on that. So like I said, usually when it comes to these contests and picking out books and stuff, I have my stack of 5 I narrowed down here. However, I couldn't not go without talking honorary mentions, so we might be here for a little bit before getting to the actual list here. My first honorable mention, I'm actually going to dig into the slab pile. I haven't got a lot of books slabbed over time, but this is one of the ones I wanted to get slabbed, so this is the only honorary mention. This almost made the top 5, but he said he didn't want to see trades and that type of stuff. And I figured for individual issues, this is kind of a little bit cheating since it's a prestige format book, and it's the size of like probably 2 to 3 comics. But nonetheless, got my 9.6, A Batman Killing Joke, as an honorary mention here. I bought this book as a kid at an antiques. Actually, it was a flea market. Probably paid like $5 to $6 for it at a flea market. Wonderful first print. But anyway, that's beyond the point. But this story was definitely like one of my favorite stories I read as a kid. It is crazy as all can get out, as you can imagine, with, Joker showing up at Jim Gordon's door. Babs answers the door and incidentally gets shot through her stomach into her spine, becoming paralyzed. And not only that, she gets captured by the Joker's men. And then Gordon gets kidnapped toward the end of this thing, and he's forced to see pictures of Babs being tortured and no clothes on. And it's the dirtiest and darkest the Joker can get at this point, basically, without, smashing you and your mom with a crowbar and blowing you up, which that's something that happens a little later than this. But yeah, definitely, this comes with the bronze into the copper age of comics, going into that darker, grittier storytelling and seeing just the characters, the villains doing things they wouldn't have done in the Silver Age, basically. So not only that, like, Batman takes a darker turn in the story as well. It's actually been speculated by Grant Morrison, of all people, that Batman kills the Joker at the end of the story while laughing like the Joker, basically meaning the Joker inevitably wins the mind game at the end of this comic. So that theory being thrown in this, and just kind of considering this almost like an Elseworlds tell instead of a continuity style tell, it really adds a lot of depth to the story if you go back and reread it with Grant Morrison's theory on it. So there's a lot of just that good Alan Moore story detail in here that it gets really deep the more you think about it. And it can't be understated, the Brian Boland art in this. Brian Boland, definitely one of my favorite artists. Unfortunately, he only does a lot of covers and stuff. But when you're getting this, you get a ton of good Brian Boland art. So definitely worth the read. Go get like a 40th printing if you have to read this, or download it somewhere. But this is a mandatory read, in my opinion. So like I said, that's just the honorable mention. You guys are going to put, probably by the time we get to book 1, it's like, why wasn't that book 1? But yeah, like I said, list can change anytime. Next up, I'll try to go through these a bit faster because I still got like my half-price books pick up and such. But maybe we'll just stay here all night. We'll see. But hey, here we go. Here's probably my most current best read honorary mention. Saga number 54, the final issue of Saga before the big break. As you can tell by the blood-ridden cover and a lonely feather floating there, There's a lot of bad things that happen to our characters in this comic book. So I won't go into too many spoilers because I know there's a ton of people out there still reading and catching up on Saga. But the way I read it, there's 3 hardcovers of Saga. There's book 1, book 2, and book 3. And this is the end of book 3, basically. And in my opinion, this is the Empire Strikes Back of Saga, this whole issue alone. So this is where pretty much all of the characters they've been hyping up come together. And it's not good. So there's a lot of bloodshed, a lot of surprising deaths happen in this. So I'm guessing when they come back for issue 55, it's going to be a whole different book. So, but like I said, it's been a while since I've read a book that has kind of shocked me this much. I mean, it was crazy. So definitely, like, if you have trouble getting into Saga, I would say give it a second chance. Because if you get to this point, your jaw will hit the floor. So it's a very good issue, one of my favorites. I actually had this for my pickups portion. I got this for $2 at an antique shop last week. But I was just like, I mainly have read this in hardcovers and stuff, but I think in terms of the read, it's a phenomenal single issue, and that is Daredevil 227. I'm actually not going to talk about this just yet because we got a best villains contest coming up soon. So I'm just going to set that aside and we'll cover that more then. But I wanted to put that on the honorary mention of this list too. Next up, we got Hawkeye issue 11 from the Matt Fraction run. This is it's a fun read. It's told from the perspective of Lucky the pizza dog. So if you guys like pet-oriented comic books and just like those one-offs that go completely off the rails a little bit. So basically in this one, you see both Hawkeyes because you have Kate Bishop involved in this with Clinton Barton now. They're kind of next door neighbors, basically. And this whole perspective takes place through the pizza dog, basically. So you get to see him get sad when the 2 Hawkeyes are having this big argument based on the stuff that happened in the previous 10 issues. He finds a dead body, and you see his little puppy dog logic try to deduce like how this guy died, and then he ends up just finding pizza in a garbage can and snacking on that. You get to see him like create a love interest and get his little puppy heart broken, and then at the end, like, it's just him and Clint hanging out, and then this is the one where Kate finally decides she needs to go out west, kind of separate herself from Clint. So at the end, he has to pick between the 2 Hawkeyes. And obviously, it's pretty heartbreaking for one of them. But yeah, I absolutely love this read. It's one of my highlights of this run. It's a very underrated run, in my opinion, from David Aja, Matt Fraction. You get a lot of good stuff. I think Annie Wu does a lot of the fill-in art on this run as well. So a lot of good stuff to be had in that one. Like I said, I love JLS is still hanging out in there. But we got some G.I. Joe number 21, the silent issue. So for me, I grew up G.I. Joe. So I always love me some Snake Eyes, some Storm Shadow, and some Scarlet. So this one, and actually check out Chuckload of Comics. He did an interview with Larry Hama, who he asked some good questions about G.I. Joe 21. So definitely check out Chuckload's video on that. But nonetheless, in this issue, it is known as being the silent issue. So you have to go see Snake Eyes. He's trying to rescue Scarlet from Cobra, basically, and it just ends up with him going toe-to-toe with Storm Shadow, and it is just a phenomenal battle. But yeah, it's just a very good, you could almost call it a non-read, but yeah, this is a good, I mean, it's just a solid read. Some of the best action ever put on a comic book page. Not much else I need to say about this one. The people who have viewed this book definitely know how cool it is. So very good read there. Next up, Infinite Crisis number 6, The Death of Connor Kent Superboy. This one was that tugged at my heartstrings. So I know Jay Hood, he was looking for single issues, but for me, the best single issues are the ones that take other issues and intertwine in the comic book medium so well that you get that payoff issue, basically. For me, this issue was a payoff in terms of just the overall Superboy storyline that was going on in Teen Titans, but written by Jeff Johns at the time, and even his 90s stuff where you kind of get to see him grow up along with Superboy and the training that he received from Superman and the friendships he formed in Young Justice with Impulse and Tim Drake Robin. But yeah, this one you get to see Cassie Wonder Girl, his girlfriend, and Nightwing joined forces to try to figure out what is going on at the heart of the Infinite Crisis, because everybody's indisposed at that point, where the only people who are available to save the day are Nightwing, he's at Titan's Tower. He's trying to form a team together to go after, this big anti-monitor tower made by Alexander Luthor. Cassie, who's pretty beat up at this point, so she's the person who's going to help fly Dick Grayson to where they need to go. And then Superboy, who's luckily he's a little rusty. He was beat up by Superboy Prime because Superboy Prime was not happy he was sitting on his ass. And yeah, you get to see the three of them go to the crisis, the heart of it, and they end up fighting Superboy Prime. And Superboy Prime gets thrown through a tower by Superboy flying through it. And unfortunately, it cost us the life of Connor Kent. And the end of the story is just called Touchdown, which is a pretty appropriate name. If you read Teen Titans, the future version of him and Cassie, like every time he does something cool, he'd be like, yeah, touchdown. So he does something cool at the end of this. And then unfortunately he dies, in Cassie's arms. And then you see at the bottom, it just says Touchdown, written by Jeff Johns, and so on and so forth. And actually, there's a little tease at one of the comics coming up later right there. So you get to see the Superboy black shirt, kind of as an Easter egg draping in the background is what's going to happen at the end of this book. New Avengers #1. So this is where you finally get to see the Justice Leagueification, if you will, I guess, of the Avengers team. So for a while, the Avengers team, you had your Scarlet Witches, your Quicksilver, She-Hulks, what some people may consider B-list characters. Shout out to Real Comic Book Talk. I'm not going to directly call those people B-list characters because I know those are some A-listers in some people's books. But this is where they basically just took all their top characters, threw them on one team together. So you got Captain America, you got Spider-Man, Iron Man. They brought in the Sentry, Wolverine, Luke Cage, and Spider-Woman. So you get to see the formation of this team. They got there's the big meta-human prison breakout. And, of course, all these characters start to get intertwined and form that team, because the best Avengers teams, they're formed in battle, and that's exactly what happens in this book. So, kind of the aftermath of this is just like, who the hell's the Sentry? And then they go in that whole storyline. And, the fact that, Spider-Woman's working for S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that good stuff. And eventually you get some Ronin action, which people love some Ronin nowadays. So another great read there. These are still just the honorable mentions. Like I said, I know I'm terrible. I can't ever pick just one, or in this case, just 5. So next up, we got Countdown to Infinite Crisis #1. So we're going back to Infinite Crisis. It was hard not to just throw these books on the top 5, but this is the ultimate Ted Kord Blue Beetle story. So one of my boys in comic bookdom, Ted Kord. So if you guys want to read just one Ted Kord story, definitely make it Countdown to Infinite Crisis. So once again, it's kind of cheaty. It was an 80 pager, so I didn't really want to put it on the top 5 list. It was very hard not to, because this is a phenomenal read. So it's just kind of almost like that whodunit style book where Ted Kord, who people very much undervalue as an actual detective, kind of like Elongated Man, basically. And he's trying to figure out like what is happening. Why are the villains forming going into the Villains United miniseries? Why is the Rand Thanagarian war going on? It's at the heart, or not the heart, but it's the beginning of the Infinite Crisis story. And then he starts to dig into the whole OMAC project, and that's where he kind of ends up meeting Maxwell Lord, who does a complete heel turn in this, and it ends with him finding out what Maxwell Lord has been doing with the OMACs. And unfortunately, as you can see here, it cost him his life. And actually, there's a cool second printing of this where you see that's Blue Beetle's face there. So a very good story. Lots of different writers and artists in this, but it's a phenomenal read. If you're looking for a good Blue Beetle story, you don't get better than that, in my opinion. And the last honorable mention, and we'll get into that chat. We got Hulk the End. So when I started collecting again in about 03, 04, I picked this up. I had no idea what it was. I knew Marvel was trying to do this The End line, and they didn't really have a lot going on with it at that time. So I think this was the first The End book. They eventually do one with Marvel Universe and Thanos, taking over and blowing everything up with the Infinity Gauntlet. And I think there's a Punisher at the end that's a pretty solid one-shot. And then there's just other ones. I won't go into every one of them. But this was the start of the End storylines, written by Peter David and Dale Keown, which actually, there you go. You got a Peter David signature there. Basically, this story takes place at the end of the world. Everything's already screwed. And the only person left, besides a bunch of like radioactive bugs, is Bruce Banner, who looks like freaking Gandalf with no robe on at this point. He just has like a little tarp covering up his business. But anyway, it's just Hulk kind of going along and Bruce Banner going along. And they're just kind of recapping, where it all went to hell and, what was flawed with the superhero design. And the biggest storyline in this, besides just the fact that, every time Banner gets attacked by bugs and he gets, his body's pretty much gets annihilated, but then he turns into the Hulk and basically completely heals. So it's just about the inner battle between the Hulk and Bruce Banner. So you see that just crazy mix of the two characters, and they really define who Bruce Banner is and who the Hulk is, to the point where Bruce Banner he doesn't want to live anymore. It's kind of sad seeing his kind of nihilistic story. He's just wandering around like this desolate planet, and his only friend is basically the Hulk, and the Hulk doesn't want to have anything to do with Banner. You know how he is. It's full on rage Hulk. He thinks Banner's stupid and he sucks. So basically, somehow Banner finally purges his mind from the Hulk body, basically killing Banner. And the end is just Hulk. He's finally content. He doesn't have Banner. And on the final panel, he's sad and he misses Banner. And that's how the story ends. So kind of a fitting end, I guess, if you had to make an ending for a character. You have the Hulk, who has been trying to get rid of the Bruce Banner persona in his head for basically his entire life. And the second he gets rid of him, he realizes he needed Bruce Banner. So kind of a touching, little nihilistic ending, but still pretty cool, especially if you've read the I'm trying to think of the George Perez storyline. Escapes me this second. It's like that two-parter, Future Imperfect, I believe. So it's a cool kind of follow-up to the stuff that happens in that, basically. All right, so we're going to get into our top 5 official contest entry for J-Hood Creative stuff here in a second. But I want to get back into this chat because I was just talking about the books. I need to get into this chat. All right, we left off on McGriddle. There we go. So we got John's Comics with Kids. What's going on, man? I like seeing John. Him and Whitewell had a cool live stream last night. Alec finally found a hot chili pepper and did the sacrifice of eating that chili pepper. So shout out to Alec. They did it to kind of shout out the Midwest Comic Man Paul's daughter's GoFundMe, which, hey, there it is in the chat once again. So definitely get the full story there if you have not already. But yeah, they just had a fun live stream last night. We got Chris Barrett saying, Killing Joke counts as one story if you ask me, since it's a continuous story. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, definitely in terms of continuity, there's a reason they made Batgirl Oracle, and it was because of that story. But yeah, I always just thought it was the cool Grant Morrison idea based on what happens on that. He says, my speculation on the end of Killing Joke is similar, but the Joker gets killed by Jim Gordon. No, that's pretty interesting. Oh, yeah, that would be the obvious person who would want revenge at that point. John's Comics Kid says, Pizza Dog. Alec and I did a show on that book. Oh, I'll have to look that up for sure. Yeah, Pizza Dog was one of the highlights of that run for me. I did so much talking about, best ofs. We're not even in the top 5 yet. I'm thirsty. I apologize. He likes that silent issue too. Yeah, absolutely. Infinite Crisis, that Comic Core episode put me to sleep. I haven't even done an episode on Infinite Crisis yet, Chris. So I guess we'll do an ASMR video on Infinite Crisis just for Chris so he can sleep at night, I guess. So yeah, that's funny. But yeah, we did we? No, that was Identity Crisis. The Identity Crisis one probably put you to sleep. So yeah, we plan on doing Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is if there's anyone out there who wants to read Crisis with us, we're going to kind of do a story recap and review coming up on the Comic Core channel whenever that's going to hit the CW airwaves. So if anyone's interested, definitely hit me up. I'd like to see how many people we can get to talk about Crisis on Infinite Earths. But I'd also like to do Infinite Crisis and maybe Final Crisis, but I just didn't like that story. I'm sorry. We got Spidey fan in chat. What's going on, man? He says, top 5, here we go, catching up on the stream. So, he's like, I think he just released a video the other day as well, so showing some very cool pickups. Liking the cover, says, my library still have some trays of G.I. Joe from Marvel and Image. Yeah, I love the Image stuff as well. I talked about that, I think, during the auction the other day. I actually sold my copy of G.I. Joe #1 I had from that Image run. It's not in continuity, but it's still a phenomenal run if you guys ever get a chance to read that. Chris Barrett says, elongated man, went to the wrong profession. If you can ever ask me, that's all I will say about that. Chris Barrett, once again, Hulk can never die, the green door. Let's see. Well, we got my first subscriber ever, Fish Tropic, in the chat. What is going on, man? Thank you for saying. Smash that like button. Man, I still got to look at what's coming out tomorrow. We can end the stream with what is coming out tomorrow, and I'll let you know my top 3 by the end of the stream there. So remind me at the end of the stream. But without further ado, good God, it's already half hour in, and I'm just now getting to my top 5. All right, so I got some banner gimmicks here. So let me select banner. So top 5, I guess we'll start with number 5 and work our way down. But top 5, this one was mandatory for me to put on here. We got Superman 75. So this was the book that got me into the game to begin with. If you guys haven't heard the story, I probably told a million times on the channel. Basically, my first comic ever was a 4th printing of Superman 75. It was folded up and put into a Christmas stocking for me. I was probably about 10 years old at the time, maybe not even that. And it was obviously life-changing for me, obviously, because it made me buy a lot of comic books, as you can see all around me here. So basically, I mean, for me, Jan Jurgens is the definitive Superman writer and artist for me. His art, that's when I picture Superman in my head. If you close your eyes and you picture what Superman should look like, for me, it looks like Dan Jurgens' Superman without the mullet. Maybe with the mullet. I'll let you decide. But nonetheless, this is probably his finest hour in terms of being a Superman writer and artist. Basically, it's just splash page after splash page of Superman getting his tail kicked in by Doomsday and Superman finding the will to get back up and keep fighting the good fight. In the storyline, the Justice League of America, which unfortunately doesn't have Batman and Wonder Woman as kind of full-on active members. You're going more toward, Blue Beetle, Booster Gold. I don't even think they had a Green Lantern at that point. You had Maxima. Maxima's about the only one who's doing anything at the end of the day. So shout out to Maxima. If you guys read this 90s Superman, I love me some Maxima. You had a guy named Bloodwind who's basically Martian Manhunter in disguise. Oh, yeah, the Green Lantern. Guy Gardner. I forgot. Yeah, sometimes I forget to count him. Guy Gardner. He was their Green Lantern. You know how well that ended up. But nonetheless, there's basically a whole issue of all those people plus Fire and Ice just getting annihilated. That is the Justice League crossover. So that was pretty much Superman's only help. And all those people got just destroyed by Doomsday. So by the time you get to Superman 75, his costume's all ripped up. He's bleeding all over the place. Doomsday's starting to bleed just a little bit. His little bones are getting chipped and broken, but it doesn't look like it looks like Superman has had much worse luck in his battle. So you get basically like 24-ish splash pages and then the fold outs on each side. And it's just an incredible comic because you get to see Superman get destroyed basically from the outside. He has to find that will to keep surviving and keep fighting to the point where, he has to sacrifice one of his beliefs in killing because he knows if Doomsday survives, Lois gets killed. Our pal Bibbo, who's very teary-eyed at the end of this, he gets killed. Jimmy Olsen gets killed. Perry White, the whole world. If he can't stop him, no one can. So Superman has to sacrifice himself, and that's exactly what happens. And you get that final fold-out of him dying in Lois's arms. And, yeah, this kind of spawned, in my opinion, the modern generation of comics for me. I know it started with, X-Men #1 and the launch of Image. I think this was DC's contribution to launching the modern age. Got this one signed by Dan Jurgens several years ago at a Wizard World. Brett Breeding a couple weekends ago at Baltimore Comic-Con. So definitely love having the SIGs on that. All right. So that was my number 5. And number 4, so this was the comic that got me into comics. And, I'll be honest, throughout the 90s, once I hit high school, start playing sports, comics weren't doing too much for me. I didn't really make too many trips to the comic shop. Actually, my local shop at the time closed down and moved locations and scaled back. So I really wasn't into comics for multiple reasons at that point. But nonetheless, one of the books when I was in college and found a local shop that's my local shop to this day, actually, I found this book right here. Well, not this exact copy. This is the director's cut, but I found the regular copy. But nonetheless, we'll get into it. Fantastic Four 500. So this is like the first comic I bought when I got back into comics. So there were several stories that got me back in after a while. Probably Ultimate Spider-Man, G.I. Joe from Image, which you already talked about, Teen Titans by Jeff Johns, which you already talked about. But Fantastic Four 500 was kind of the one that drew me back in above anything else. So in this story here, which I'll also, by the way, got a cool Mark Waid signature on there. So in this story, it's the unthinkable storyline conclusion. So prior to this, Dr. Doom, he has realized that he cannot take on the Fantastic Four. He's finally came to grips with the fact that he himself, using science, cannot beat the Fantastic Four. So what Doom does, he goes out and he kind of tries to make, it seems like he's trying to make peace with himself. He finds his old flame, Valeria, not the Fantastic Four member, Valeria, who's, Reed and Sue's daughter, but his actual love, the only woman he has ever loved. And he just spends a day with her. And he goes out, he has a good time. And at the very end of issue 66, if I remember right, maybe it's 68, I can't remember. But nonetheless, he just up and kills her. It's like, what? Why did he kill her? So you find out he sacrifices the only thing he loves in the world so he can get access to black magic. So he can now use, not only can he use science, he can use magic and blend the two together and finally become a formidable force to fight all of the Fantastic Four. So by the time you get to issue 500, Franklin Richards has been condemned to hell with Doctor Strange. He has kidnapped Valeria because he wants to raise Valeria as his own, which has been covered in this whole run already. He has power swapped Sue and Johnny to where they don't know how to control their powers, and they're captured at that point. And he's got Ben captured because it's the thing. He just wants to torture him by beating the crap out of him because they're usually the two that slug it out. So the only person left to fight Doom is Reed Richards. And Reed Richards, as you know, is a scientist. He's one of the biggest, sharpest brains in the Marvel Universe, and his main focus is science. So when it comes to magic, Doom knows he has him beat tenfold. So luckily, Doctor Strange is able to astral project himself to communicate to Reed, to try to give him a little bit of a how-to guide on how to use magic. And at that point, the best thing he can do he's not going to try to use magic to fight Dr. Doom. He's going to use magic to save his family. So luckily, he's able to save the Fantastic Four, all four of them. He gets Valeria out of harm's way. Baby Valeria, that is, not already dead girlfriend Valeria. See, the two characters, same name. You know how that goes in comics. But anyway, you see Fantastic Four versus Dr. Doom. Good old classic slugfest. They got magic involved this time. Science and magic mix like oil and water, and that's kind of what it does here. And you get to see, Reed, he's just like, I know you picked magic because you think I'm an imbecile and blah, blah, blah. And Doom's like, wow, that's an understatement. So basically what happens toward the very end, they open a portal to hell. They got to get Franklin and Doctor Strange out of hell, which they do so. And meanwhile, they throw Dr. Doom into hell. And on his way into hell, Dr. Doom, he's like, oh, my God, I'm sorry. He's basically pleading for his life. And Reed, he knows he's lying, but he still goes in for like that one last, I'm going to boot kick you into hell, basically. But in the process, Doom, he raises up his hand like this and just touches Reed's face. And when he does that, he uses magic to leave a handprint scar on Reed's face to leave that one last sting. So, because he has a line at the end, he's just like, all I want to do right now, Dr. Doom, is forget you. And Doom just goes, you will never forget me, and scars his face. And the end image of this comic is a broken mirror. It just shows Reed's face with a scar on it, and he can't even use his powers to heal the scar. So very, very good conclusion to the storyline. A phenomenal issue for Dr. Doom fans out there. Can't recommend this one enough. It got me back into comics. And actually, when I interviewed Mark Waid at Baltimore Comic-Con, I asked him, I kind of stole this question and just kind of, whittled it down. And I asked him, what is his favorite individual issue he's the most proud of? And he said the first issue of this run because he got to work with Mike Wieringo. And I thought that was a really cool answer to that question. So definitely check out Mark Waid, Mike Wieringo's Fantastic Four. Some phenomenal stuff wrapped up into that read. All right, number 3. Let me take a sip of water for this one. All right. So this one, like I said, for me, I was not a gigantic, huge fan of this character before reading this run, and now he is probably my top favorite character. So we got to talk about some Jeff Johns Green Lantern. And the issue I have picked to do that is Green Lantern number 25. For me, it was a little difficult to pick one Green Lantern book as a single issue because I have it up there on my wall, the Sinestro Corps War kickoff issue, which that's where, Sinestro gets all these big baddies together. You have Anti-Matter, Cyborg Superman, Superman Prime, and just has this huge, formidable force that not even the Green Lantern Corps, all the DC heroes can go up against. So that's how it all starts, with all these like non-Green Lantern villains coming together just to fight the Green Lantern Corps and destroy it as it's rising up from the ashes. And I also really wanted to pick some of the Green Lantern Rebirth stuff because that's the return of Hal Jordan. And like I said, I really like it when writers, they take kind of like cruddier, worse storylines and just stuff that's been crapped on the character, and they somehow weave their story and make sense of all of the insanity that's happened to that character. And that's what Jeff Johns did in his Green Lantern run. Hal Jordan, he got turned, wrestling term again, he got turned heel in the late 90s or the mid 90s, turned into Parallax. Zero Hour happened to him where he went full on Parallax. Tried to reinvent the universe with Coast City in his reshaping. Then Final Night happened where he had to relight the sun using the remainder of his powers. Then he became the Spectre for some reason. And then Green Lantern Rebirth happened. Jeff Johns made sense of all that. I won't go into how he made sense of it. I'll just go read it or check out Maddie Thanatos's and Boy Who Had Seven's video on their Green Lantern reread. Hopefully they come back and finish that one day and get to this point. But yeah, they did a phenomenal job summing up why Green Lantern Rebirth is so good. But nonetheless, we'll get into issue 25. So issue 25 is the conclusion of the Sinestro Corps War storyline. So once again, I know he didn't want me to do like full reads. For me, this individual issue personifies why Green Lantern is so good. So it starts off, you get a shot of Coast City, basically, which I just said it's in the midst of being raised up from the ashes. That's kind of what this first run is all about, because it was blown up in the 90s. Coast City's coming back, basically. So, of course, Sinestro, being the baddie he is, he wants to rip the heart out of Hal Jordan, basically, at this point, because they're mortal enemies. You guys know the story at that point. So Sinestro, when he goes to Earth, he's not going from Metropolis or Gotham. When he wants to do some damage, he's going to go to Coast City because it's going to rip the heart out of Hal Jordan. It already did once. He knows it happened. He knows if this happens again, Hal Jordan won't be able to tolerate it, basically. He's just going to go nuts again. So when, Earth is engaged in battle, all the other bad guys are all around the world, but Sinestro, he's going to Hal's home. He's hitting him where it hurts the most. So I think it's Kyle, if I remember right, gets there first, Kyle Rayner. So he's heavily involved in the Coast City battle as well. He's trying to get the people to evacuate Coast City. And I swear one of the most emotional moments I've ever seen in a comic is instead of, them evacuating Coast City again because they're so used to disaster and mayhem happening to them, they turn off their lights and they put a little Green Lantern in their windowsill saying, "We are home of Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern. He knows no fear, therefore we will show no fear." So the whole city, instead of leaving in fear, because Sinestro's Corps, they're based on fear, they put a little green light in their windowsill and they say, "We're not going anywhere. We trust Hal Jordan," which is a huge statement because no one's trusted Hal Jordan up until this point in the Jeff Johns run. So you get this huge battle all across, DC Earth, and the heart of it is between Hal and Sinestro. And of course, you got Kyle in there too, but he kind of gets beat up a lot, so Hal can be the star, unfortunately for him. But nonetheless, the Green Lanterns, they prevail, and then you kind of get to see at the tail end of this the effects that the Sinestro Corps forming had, because you get the first appearance of Larfleeze in the Orange Lanterns. You get Atrocitus in the Red Lanterns. You kind of get to see the preview that is going to be the full Spectrum War coming up. So not only does this comic serve as a great ending to the Sinestro Corps War, it branches off into, Rage of the Red Lanterns, seeing all the other Lantern Corps fight, and of course the most notable one, Blackest Night. So Johns does a lot of stuff in this double-sized issue that is probably still, it's definitely up there with best single reads. There's no question about it. All right, so before we get into issues number 2 and 1 here, let's go back to that chat, because I saw a lot of people hopping in here. We got Bub's Comics. What's going on, man? I always like seeing Bub in the No Faces chat every Monday night. John's Comics the Kid says that's a great book. He got 2 copies. I don't even know how many copies I have of 25. I wouldn't mind trying to get that variant at some point, but that's just one of those ones. If I see it in a while, I'll pick it up. I'm probably not going to go eBay hunting or pay top dollar for it or anything. But there is a B cover to that issue 25. Chris says yellow beats green and wood beats ring. All right. We got Fish Tropic still saying smash that like button. Thank you. Oh, look at that. We got Brett Hess Art. What's going on, man? He says, no, I got to go read that shite. And thank you for the compliment, John. We got From Heroes to Icons. So that's a beautiful book, and he only has the 1 copy. May have been talking about Fantastic Four, number 500. Let's see what else we got. We still got Spidey Fan says, can you actually reach to the top row of the short boxes, or do you need steps? So, no, luckily I'm about 6'2", so I have no problem reaching up there. It's that stupid middle shelf. You guys ever notice there is like no space right there on that middle shelf? So I need to find a way to get rid of that metal, but it is a load-bearing piece of metal all the way down. So that is the only drawback to this shelf. I can still get the short boxes out, but they're in there tight. So, but yeah, I have no problem getting them off the top shelf there. We got TMC Comics. What's going on, man? How you doing tonight? And then Chris wants to know who won the Spectrum War. Well, I think the book is still called Green Lantern, so I'm going to guess the Green Lanterns. All right, so we'll go ahead and get into issue number 2 here. So issue number 2, once again, my favorite issues are the ones that take long-term storylines and wrap them up and make just a phenomenal experience into a single issue. And for me, nothing does that better than Why the Last Man issue 60, the final issue of what probably is the best read post-2000. My top is still Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's what it meant to me as a kid and how I used that to get to know the DC universe. But I think post-2000, this is probably the finest read you can find. So I really wanted to pick issue 1, but for me, it just had to be issue 60 because it just, oh man, there's just so much good stuff that they cram in here. So, and it's a little crazy the way they did this too. So the previous issue, unfortunately, I have to see, I guess, full-on spoilers for Why the Last Man readers out there. But you had a lot of time, so too bad, so sad, I guess. So spoilers on the end of Why the Last Man. We're going to go full on into it. Issue 59, Agent 355 dies. It's devastating. York obviously doesn't take it too well. So you're just like, well, how do you follow that up? They go like an entire generation later to where York is an old man sitting basically in a hospital, and he's getting visited by a younger version of himself, which pretty much represents York before the virus happened. So you see the clone of York and old man York meet in this hospital, surrounded by like clones of Ampersand, and he kind of just talks about, you see a part where he's just like, I'm surrounded by all these monkey clones, but they never got him quite right. And then that probably cuts to the moment of the comic to me. I talked about this one being pretty emotional, when the Coast City talked about having no fear. Probably the most emotional scene for me in this is where you see an older York. He's already bald. He's wearing hat. They're walking around in a snowstorm. It's York and Ampersand, and he's trying to feed Ampersand a grape, and he's just not eating it. He's hurting. He's dying. So you have to see York. You get that heart-wrenching scene of Ampersand passing away in York's arms. There seems to be a lot of that on these best ofs, actually. But nonetheless, you see York, you see Ampersand, and he's just so devastated. Even when he's an old man, he's just sitting there missing his monkey Ampersand. And then you also see other scenes of like what happened with Dr. Man, and you get to see them, she basically had kids and there's like 5 of them that all kind of like represent a version of her personality. And that kind of warms his heart after we get that, kind of depressing scene of losing Ampersand. And then you kind of get, there's basically a scene with everyone he lost, just like one good moment he had with them. You get to see a scene with him in 355 where basically he's trying to more or less tie his shoes, and 355's having to do it for him because, he's so useless and she's so good at what he does. And you kind of, like, the final scene is just him. He kind of breaks out of the hospital and, finally lets go of everything that was burdening him at this point. And you see a straitjacket flying in the wind, and you just get that closing shot, and then you get like a little imposed signature of all the creators at the bottom. So for me, a nice ending, a nice little bow or feather in the cap to Y the Last Man. So you had to read 59 previous issues to really appreciate this. But this issue 60, I think Brian K. Vaughan absolutely knocked it out of the park. Maybe his best single, well, I guess it has to be his best single issue because it's number 2 on my list, and he's not number 1. Sorry. It was a close call, but at the end of the day, this had to be my number 2 on this list. So once again, read this book if you haven't already. Why the Last Man? I don't know what else I can do to encourage people to read at this point. And my number 1, I don't have a drum roll gimmick lined up, but too bad, so sad, I guess. So my number 1, I actually probably spoiled this on previous live feeds and stuff. We got Superman Annual number 11. For me, Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons. That's a, if there was a comic book Hall of Fame, that's a Hall of Fame combo right there, in my opinion. Come on, Watchmen. Yeah. But for me, this is the best single issue of a comic ever. They're so good. They actually made a cartoon on Justice League Unlimited. It's pretty much a direct adaptation of this. So if you guys aren't familiar with this at this point, basically Black Mercy Flower gets put on Superman by Mongol. So you find that out because Wonder Woman, Jason Todd, Robin, and Batman are going to visit the Fortress of Solitude, and they're trying to figure out what to get Superman for his birthday. And that's why this comic is for the man who has everything, because, he has all the powers. He has some of the best friends in the world, especially in Batman and Wonder Woman, not to mention his Metropolis family. He has this phenomenal Fortress of Solitude. So what do you get Superman? And Mongol's answer is the Black Mercy. So what the Black Mercy does is once it's on Superman's chest, it basically puts him in a realistic dreamlike state where the dream he's having, he's back on Krypton. He has a family. He has this like really close-knit relationship with his son. Like it's really close to more than he has with his wife or Jor-El. Actually, it seems like he has a little bit of flack toward Jor-El in both versions of the story, the Justice League Unlimited and on this one. So I guess they just maybe throw that in there to kind of make it so it's not too perfect, so it feels a little bit more real. But nonetheless, you kind of see, the perspective of Superman inside the Black Mercy's mercy, I guess. And then you get to see Wonder Woman showdown with Mongol, and she is just getting tore up by Mongol, basically. Batman knows there's pretty much, he's the world's greatest detective, but there's not a lot he can do in terms of brute force. Best thing, he throws a batarang, it bounces off of him. That's not going to do anything good. So Robin's kind of distraction guy. Wonder Woman's getting slaughtered, basically. Luckily, she finds the weapons room. You get some cool scenes of her using Kryptonian weapons. But Batman mainly is trying to get that Black Mercy off of Superman, which he basically helps him doing. But the most tear-jerking moment in this one is where Superman, luckily, when people think Superman, I think a lot of people think of his power set, his brute force, and that stuff. But some people, underestimate how smart Superman actually is. So when Superman's in there, he finally pieces together and figures out that none of this is real. And you find that out as a reader when he's talking to his son. They finally just say, screw, whatever city Krypton is, because they're tired of all the politics and, Jor-El. So they just kind of go off together to meet up with their family. And he meets him. He just goes, son, I love you, but I don't think you're real. And that's where it kind of hits your heartstrings right there, because, the emotional impact it's having on Superman at that point. He has to come to grips with the fact that this reality he's pretty cool with isn't real. And if he doesn't do anything about it, worse things are going to happen. So the Black Mercy comes off with help of Batman, and you get to see, Batman gets it he basically makes a sacrifice and wraps it around him. and then you get to see like him in Crime Alley, and then you get to see his family. His dad actually fights back against Joe Chill, and he's sitting there cheering, and he realizes very quickly because Batman, he's smart too, obviously. He realizes it's not real, so luckily the Black Mercy doesn't have too much of a long-term effect on Bruce. But when Superman gets this thing taken off of him, he is pissed, obviously. It's just like taking a fly off, no big deal. But the emotional impact it had on Superman was a damage that maybe no one else has ever done to Superman. So when he's fighting Mongol, he basically is like, I don't have to hold back on you, Mongol, and he just destroys him, more or less. But still, Mongol, he's a tough guy. He puts up a fight. And ultimately, the way they defeat Mongol is they throw the Black Mercy on him. It's actually Jason Todd in this one who drops the Black Mercy onto Mongol and almost saves the day. So it was kind of interesting in the cartoon version. I think it's just Batman heaves it at him and they win. But in this one, it was Jason Todd just drops it down from the ceiling and it lands on Mongol. And then it kind of ends with Mongol. He's celebrating his victory. He won. But then they cut to another panel and he's wearing the Black Mercy. So, yeah, I mean, for me, probably Alan Moore's best tale. I mean, I love me some Watchmen and, V for Vendetta and all the other stuff that he's done. But, man, I think for single issues, it doesn't get any better than Superman Annual number 11. So, definitely my top pick for favorite individual read of all time. So, I know sometimes in the comic medium, the best tales are usually like 5 issues, 10, 12 issues, but sometimes it's just hard to get it from, 24 to 64 pages like these comics did. So I think for me, these 5 issues, at least today, tomorrow, like I said, I didn't talk about like All-Star Superman at all. I didn't mention an individual issue of Watchmen. There's a bunch of stuff on that wall right there. I mean, I didn't really talk about Spider-Man. I could have made a list of just Spider-Man between Ultimate Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, all that good stuff. So, like I said, I kind of ran out of time and just took out the alternative mentions and then the top 5. So, once again, check out the comments below for J Hood Creative's information on how to get into his contest because he's got a hell of a prize package. And just sum up his channel because he's quickly on the rise. He's got great stuff on his channel. So, definitely check him out. All right, before we get into the next contest, I want to talk about the chat. We still got Fish Tropic in there giving his thumbs up, so thank you for joining us, Fish Tropic, and sticking around. We got From Heroes to Icons. He says he loves the episode in the cartoon. And he says, wow, that's the book, Batman Bring Him Cash. Yeah. Actually, I don't think it's cash in that book. That's the one part I like better in the episode than the comic where Batman's just like, I got him cash. I think he gets him like a rare flower or something based on a Kryptonian breed in this comic. And then that's like when he's talking about flowers, that's where they kind of discover the Black Mercy as a segue into the story. So I do like the cash joke better, but I understand why they talked about flowers so they could segue it to the Black Mercy flower. TMC says the last woman will be next. Yeah, that would be a funny parody, I suppose. Oh, look at this. We got YouTube is 90. Drink it in, man. After doing that, I need to drink it in, man. So that's how you do a segue. All right. So next up, once again, description below. Check out Sam's Tangled Web, who's celebrating 500 subscribers. And what he wants, actually, I think if you don't want to make a video, you just go to his video and make a comment. All he wants to know is, what is your favorite villain? So I don't know if you guys remember this book from what feels like a whole day ago because I've been running my mouth for a whole hour straight now. So thank you for sticking with me. But nonetheless, he wants to talk about favorite villains, which before I pulled this out of my pulls, I was really close to picking, I was talking with Dr. Doom because of the Fantastic Four 500. Just the stuff that he does in that comic, I think that's some best villain style stuff. But then I found this for $2 at an antique shop last week, and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot about Born Again. Probably my favorite Marvel story. So for me, best villain has to go to Kingpin. The fact that what he does to Daredevil, because usual villain, he's like, oh, I'm going to kill you or injure you, blah, 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 or do something bad. What happens in this one? This specific is Daredevil issue 227. So it starts Karen Page. She's full on druggy at this point. She needs that fix. She needs another hit of coke or whatever. So what she does is she goes to a drug dealer, and instead of giving cash, she sells the identity of Matt Murdock. So of course that guy immediately takes that information, and who does he end up working for? He works for Kingpin. So Wilson Fisk, once he figures out Matt Murdock and Daredevil are the same, he doesn't just go and try to kill him. He freezes his bank accounts. He has his heat and gas turned off. He has his water turned off. He gets him disbarred from his law firm. He makes sure he can't use any credit cards. And then, Daredevil, he goes out. He's just trying to beat up villains and figure out what somebody has against Matt Murdock. And by the time he goes back, he's going back to his apartment. He's kind of, he's pretty much on the ropes. And what happens? Kingpin has his whole building blown up where he lives. So not only does he doesn't have any money, he doesn't have a job, and now everything he owns just gets blown up. He didn't want to make sure he was in the building to blow him up. He just wanted to send a message to Matt Murdock that he knows, and he wants to see him suffer rather than kill him. So this is some next level villainy right here, if you ask me. I also kind of wanted to pick, the governor from Walking Dead, maybe some Lex Luthor, but just the fact that Kingpin, he just likes to play with his enemies, basically. He doesn't even want to kill them. He just wants to make sure the message is sent and that they are humble to what Kingpin can do. So for me, this issue is a top villain issue if there ever was one. So definitely check it out. Born Again. Just the fact that after this, you get to see Daredevil rise up from the gutters, basically. He gets beat up by a poor man's Santa Claus in one issue. So he's really down in the dumps. So you get to see him rise up and fight back against the Kingpin. It's a very inspirational story. I highly recommend you check it out. But Sam, my pick for your contest is definitely got to be Kingpin based on the Frank Miller run. So there is that. So once again, sub up both Jehab Creative, Sam's Tangled Web. They are in the descriptions below. All right, so my last thing we'll talk about, we'll go through these pretty quick because I'm already pushing over an hour. So thank you guys once again for sticking with us here, sticking with me, I should say. We got a couple pickups here. So as usual, I go to Half Price Books once a week. They usually put out their bins at that frequency, so I try to go before anyone else does. Nothing too crazy this week from Half Price Books. Got me a Green Lantern 55, one of those wonderful DCU variants. Love collecting those. Got plenty of those in the collection now, but I always like it when I get ones from characters I like Green Lantern. Still really on the look for the issue 49 with the hands where he's just wearing the rings and he's like that. They have a DC logo variant of that I'd like to find, but got me the 0 Hour crossover. So loved me some 0 Hour in the 90s. Don't know if old Spidey fan is watching, but I know he'd like this one. Justice League number 9, Jim Lee Flash variant. So Jim Lee had some killer B covers on this, so I thought that was one of the nicest ones. I like me some Flash, so I got that for $1. Still need to bag and board these. Got these for 20 cents a piece. Got me some Savage Dragon TMNT issue 2. I may already have this one in the collection, but I just instinctively pick up Turtles, especially, hey, 20 cents. Not going to pass it up for 20 cents. It actually looks like it may be a flip book, too. Looks like you get Vanguard 0. Didn't know that. So there you go. 2 comics for 1. 90s flip book gimmick action. Love it. I got Hellshock number 1. 2 covers on that. We got probably the more recognizable one. Cool J. Lee cover on that. 20 cents. 20 cents as well for the other cover. So there you go. Another awesome J. Lee art-packed book. And then, why not, Image Plus number 1. I feel like this is the first somebody doing something. I don't know. But just a cool representation of 90s Image. Who doesn't love him? 90s Image. Got this coupon Image fan club member inside it. You can win a dinner with 2 with Todd McFarlane. That'll be fun, right? So Image Plus number 1 for 20 cents. And I got this for $1. I have no idea what this book is. I just thought it was interesting. It's like a Justice League index, but it is not branded at all with the DC logo. So I have no clue what the origin of this book is. I was going to research it before, and I kind of forgot about it until just now. So I'll have to set that aside and flip through it, see what's going on there. And as I mentioned, I went to an antique shop, got some $2 comics. This was one of them. I wanted to rebag it and talk about it as a part of Sam's Tangled Web contest. Oh, man, I forgot to do the gimmick. Sam, if you're watching out there. There, burn it down. I forgot to do that. So there you go, Sam. So $2 for that book, Daredevil, $2.27. Steal of a deal. Once again, Thor God of Thunder. First somebody doing something, I think. I don't know. Well, I like some Jason Aaron, some Thor. Got it for $2. Got this nice looking king size Avengers Annual number 8. Thought that was a good looking copy for $2. Newsstand. So there you go, I guess, as I spill things everywhere. So I botched that bad. We'll get the brand up. So there you go. Newsstand. There. Sorry. After 1 hour being by myself talking an hour straight, my energy's waning a little bit, I guess. I got a higher number G.I. Joe for $2, so issue 130. We'll try this one more time. And it's a newsstand. That's much better. All right, so a newsstand 130. About every time I see the G.I. Joe upper numbers, I got to get them if they're cheap. They're hard to find. Usually once you get past like that 125 mark, you don't see these G.I. Joes too often. So obviously wouldn't mind having a 155 one day and then that like special edition with Snake Eyes, the McFarlane swipe on that cover. Here's one I didn't have for surprisingly. I have Action Comics 485, kind of like Neil Adams's revisit to that one cover in the Kryptonite chains because he didn't like the way the leg looked on that cover. So I think this was his second shot at it, which he was more happy with. So definitely enjoyed getting that Neil Adams goodness. Speaking of Neil Adams, he also is on the cover of 466, where Lex Luthor is punching a baby Superman in the back of the head. So what's not the love there, I guess. So children getting punched in the back of the head. There you go. Found a Marvel Age number 1 for $2. Haven't seen this around too often. Pretty clean copy in my opinion. So for $2, figured why not go ahead and pick up the Marvel Age book. Amazing Spider-Man 173. So once again, you see cheap Spider-Man for under the issue 200 for a couple bucks. Usually just go ahead and pick that up. They're always pretty safe buys, always good reads. So figure why not go and pick up an issue 173 for $2. I was missing this in my run. New Teen Titans number 10. So one of the few earlier number ones I was missing. So happy to put number 10 in the collection. I think I have like 1 through 15 basically complete. Had to get a Brian Boland Wonder Woman for $2. I think this is one of the few I was missing out of that run. So trying to collect all these Boland covers on the Wonder Woman run, just missing that like one with the white background. She's got like the shield on the bottom and that stuff. I think that's about the only one I'm missing out of this run. G.I. Joe 120. I couldn't remember if I had this one or not, but I figured why not just go ahead and pick it up. Like I said, I like to get the upper number 1s. That's kind of like on that threshold where they become a little bit harder to find. And if you see them on eBay, people like to mark them up for no reason. And like I said, usually if they're $1, $2, I'll pick them up. And my last book of the day, which I'm surprised I didn't have. It's kind of like a book I kind of forgot existed and I should own it. But we got Superman 643. So a cover swipe of Superman number 1 from 1940. And it's just a beautiful George Perez cover swipe. And he writes on there an homage to Joe Shuster. So a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. George Perez breeding on that one. So what is not the love for $2 on this Action Comics? Is kind of like post-crisis, I believe. So you had Superman tale with John Byrne. You had Man of Steel coming in. So he's on the brink of having 4 books around this point. So definitely thought that was a cool book to own. And that does it for the Tuesday night live stream. So we'll say hi to a few more people in the chat, and then we will sign off here. So we got Thomas Wayne in the chat. How's it going, man? Long time no see. Happy to see Thomas Wayne turning up in that chat. We got Justice for Comics saying, hey, TMC, no Thursday night. Another Whiskey, Cigars, and Comic Show. That sounds like fun. So there you go. TMC Comics still in the house. Chad 90. All right, guys. So that does it for this week's Tuesday night live stream. Once again, I'll put that GoFundMe link for Moira in the chat. Definitely check that out. Check out J Hood Creative and his contest. Check out Sam's Tangled Web. Congratulations, guys, on the subscriber counts. I know J Hood will be up to 500 in no time, and Sam, he'll keep climbing as well. And at the tail end of the show, we got King of Comicdom. What is going on, man? Been enjoying his channel since he brought it back. Definitely sub up King of Comicdom. Lawrence has a great channel over there, one of the finest collections in the entire comic book community. And if you guys like spinner racks, definitely sub up King of Comic. Oh, there's old McNugget himself, Chris Barrett. We got Comic Man Andy hopping in at the end of the show. He says he's going to catch the replay. So, Andy, beard gone too soon, but nonetheless, probably need to change that thumbnail, Andy. Let's get him real big on the screen. I'm just waiting for StreamYards to load it up. I think it just quit because it's an hour 10 in. I still got Thomas Wayne as the last one. I always have the two chats up. I have the StreamYards on this side, and on this side I have the YouTube chat. And then, yeah, there's old Comic Man Andy with his beard and that picture. You need to make that same picture of you just frowning with no beard. And as it grows back, you kind of start to get a smile going a little bit. But he says it's cold up there in Michigan. Love me some Comic Man Andy. Big thanks, guys, for joining us, and have a wonderful night.